Hello friends, today we will discuss the topic of Model Code of Conduct. Now we know that state elections are ongoing in the state, and with regards to it, there was a news in the recent newspaper that Election Commission has asked the Telangana state government to stop the disbursement of Rythu Bandhu Scheme. Now why it was stopped and what is the provisions of Model Code of Conduct with regards to it, we'll discuss in today's class. So, from prelims perspective, this topic is important with respect to roles and powers of Election Commission, and also what is Model Code of Conduct and how it is implemented, what is its timeline. From mains perspective, we need to understand how the Model Code of Conduct has evolved, what are its shortcomings, and what is the role of Election Commission in this regard. So, let's start the topic. Now, first, let's discuss what is Model Code of Conduct. Now, basically, this is a model code, which means it is just a set of principles which the political parties and candidates which are contesting elections are required to follow. Now, this is something which has not been drafted by any law as such, but it has been evolved from time to time, and all the political parties have consensus with regards to it. Now, this Model Code of Conduct generally it gives guidelines which political parties and candidates need to follow during its campaigning. Now, why such guidelines are required? Because to ensure that every candidate contesting the election has a level playing field. No candidate, suppose there is a party in power, there are chances that it can utilize the government machinery to its own benefit. Now, to ensure that the party in power don't do such activities, a Model Code of Conduct is implemented. Apart from regulating the activities of parties in power, the Model Code of Conduct also has various provisions which regulates the speeches of the candidates. It tries to stop the hate speeches or asking votes in the name of community or race or language. So what are exact provisions of Model Code of Conduct we'll discuss, but this is the general idea of what Model Code of Conduct is. Now, Election Commission under Article 324 has the duty to ensure to direction and control of election. It has the constitutional mandate to ensure that elections takes place in a free and fair manner. Now, with respect to that power, this Model Code of Conduct has evolved, and Election Commission ensures the observance of this Model Code of Conduct. Now, with regards to timeline, the Model Code of Conduct applies as soon as Election Commission declares the election schedule. So generally, we have seen that Election Commission will hold one press conference and they will release the timetable or schedule of the election. Right from that press conference till the date the results are announced, the Model Code of Conduct will be in place. Now, what does Model Code of Conduct basically ensure? That official machinery for electoral process is not misused. So that's what we have discussed, that whatever the official machinery is in place, the party in power or the government of the day don't misuse it for their electoral gains. It also ensures that electoral offences, malpractices and corrupt practices are prevented by all the means. So this is the main purpose of Model Code of Conduct. Now let's see how the Model Code of Conduct has evolved. Now, the first model was a code with regards to election was seen in 1960 during Kerala Assembly election. During this election, state administration itself had come up with a code of conduct for all political parties. So this was the origin of the idea of Model Code of Conduct. Now later in 1962, there were Lok Sabha elections, and during this Lok Sabha election, Election Commission of India itself circulated the Model Code of Conduct. But from 1962 to 1990s, the Model Code of Conduct was it was kind of like principles where it was not strongly followed by all the political parties. It was in 1990s when there was repeated violation of election norms. Then Election Commission decided that we'll enforce the Model Code of Conduct very strictly. So with this regard, we have to remember the name of T.N. Seshan. He was the 10th Chief Election Commissioner of India. He was a very powerful Chief Commissioner. He ensured that Model Code of Conduct is implemented very strictly. He brought a lot of changes in the election process and is highly regarded in the Election Commission. Now, there's one incident also with regards to T.N. Seshan. In 1992, there were certain by-elections going on, and there were repeated violations of Model Code of Conduct by various political parties. Now, during that time, T.N. Seshan, who was the then election commissioner, altogether cancelled the election because of violation of Model Code of Conduct. So, from 1990s, we have seen that the Model Code of Conduct has been enforced very strictly by the Election Commission's office. Now in 2013, recently, Supreme Court has also directed that the Model Code of Conduct should also include guidelines regarding the election manifestos which are released by political parties. We'll see in detail what are these guidelines in next slide. So this is the roughly how the model code of conduct has evolved from 1960s till present times. Okay. Now let's see what are general points covered in model code of conduct. Actually, it is a long document, but I've just covered what are the basic and important points which are covered in model code of conduct. So we get an idea what actually is this code. So regarding general conduct, the model code of conduct limits criticism of political parties to their policies and program. So during the speeches, the candidates have to ensure that they criticize the other political parties only with regards to their policies and programs, and they don't make any personal defamatory attacks. So this is one of the points covered in model code of conduct. Similarly, it says that the code says that the candidate shouldn't use any caste or communal divide to secure votes, and it cannot intimidate voters or bribe the voters for winning the election. Similarly, with regards to meetings and procession, it says that any meetings or procession should be held. The candidates or the political party should prior inform the government machinery or the police so that necessary arrangements can be made. And regarding the polling day and polling booth, there are certain guidelines like food and alcohol should not be distributed outside polling stations, or the near the polling booth only people who have valid pass from election commission are allowed to enter the polling booth. And similarly, there are few recent additions which have been made in model code of conduct regarding opinion and exit polls. So it regulates the timings when opinion and exit polls can be issued. There is restriction on government advertisement featuring political functionaries during election period. So we know that government has some budget, and it time and again it gives advertisement in newspaper regarding its schemes and programs. Now, for example, elections are taking place, and at that time, the government in power uses those advertisement as means of promoting their party. It will violate. It will give them undue advantage. So, model code of conduct prohibits such kind of advertisements when the code of conduct is in force. So, these are the general topics which are covered under model code of conduct. Now, specifically with regards to party in power, what are the provisions in model code of conduct? We'll see. Now, these restrictions were started in 1979 to regulate the conduct of party in power. Now, first let us understand why it is necessary to regulate the party in power during elections. Now, suppose a government is in place and elections are coming. Now, to secure the votes, the government can announce schemes like giving freebies or announcing that will directly transfer this many amount. So what happens is this increases the chance of winning the election, but this gives them undue advantage. It doesn't create a level playing field for all the candidates. So to prevent such misuse, there are some guidelines which are issued for party in power. One such important guidelines is no major schemes or major announcement regarding construction of roads or certain infrastructure projects cannot be announced during the code of conduct. Also, there are other certain points like they cannot combine the official visit when election work or use of official machinery for the same. So they can't combine the official visit with their campaigning. Similarly, they cannot advertise with government expenditure regarding the achievements of their government during the code of conduct is in place. This is regarding the advertising. And also, like we discussed, that ministers and other authorities cannot announce any financial grants or promise any construction of roads, provision of drinking water, or for example, certain important appointments or transfer also cannot be done during model code of conduct is in place. This is all to ensure that all the parties get a level playing field during the election. And also one is that the public spaces and rest houses, they must be allowed to be used by all the parties, not just for the government or the party which is in power. So these are the provisions regarding the party in power in model code of conduct. Now, under these provisions only, the election commission has asked the Telangana state government to stop the disbursement of Rythu Bandhu Scheme. We'll see exactly what it was in coming slide, but this is the brief idea, like under which powers election commission used to stop the disbursement of Rythu Bandhu Scheme. Now, recently in 2013, we have seen that MCC provisions also included election manifesto. Now, what are the guidelines regarding election manifesto is, it should not contain anything against ideals of constitution. It should not go against the directive principles or the basic principles which are enshrined in constitution. And they should also not make promises which are likely to vitiate the purity of election or exert undue influence on voters. And it should also reflect the rationale for promises and broadly indicate the ways and means to meet the financial requirement. Now, this says that if any promise is made in manifesto, it should also see how the means to secure those promise, or is the financial viability available with the state or the government to meet this promise. This is basically to check the freebies which has been in the news recently that many political parties announced a lot of freebies before the election takes place, and those freebies are also mentioned in manifesto. Now, without mentioning the background, like how government plans to finance those freebies, those cannot be included in election manifesto as per Model Code of Conduct guidelines. Also, the manifestos, this is the time, this provision is regarding the period when manifesto can be released. Manifesto cannot be released during the prohibitory period under section 126. So under section 126, it says that 48 hours concluding when the last phase of election, last phase of voting is concluded. So that basically means, suppose elections are tomorrow, so 48 hours before that, any political party cannot release the manifesto. So this is regarding model provisions regarding election manifesto. Now, let's see what are the shortcomings of Model Code of Conduct or criticism. Now, this is important from your mains perspective. Okay, so one major shortcoming of Model Code of Conduct, which has been highlighted time and again, is it does not have any statutory backing. So it is not legally enforceable. As we've seen that it has been evolved from the consensus of political parties. Now, there have been time and again various committees which have recommended that we need to legally enforce Model Code of Conduct. One such committee was Standing Committee on Personal and Public Grievances. Now, Election Commission has said that if the Model Code of Conduct is legally enforced, it will reduce its power to take action quickly. Now, during the period of election, a time is an important factor. Now, for example, if Model Code of Conduct is made legal, then if any action had to be taken by Election Commission, it has to follow the legal route, which can be lengthy, and that will not serve the purpose of this Model Code of Conduct. So Election Commission has maintained that it does not want to make Model Code of Conduct a statutory document, and it also says that there are certain provisions in IPC or CRPC or Representation of People's Act which can be used when the Code of Conduct is violated. Now, second is, even though Model Code of Conduct is in place, we have seen that there are a lot of instances of fake news or hate speeches, or how the money and muscle power is used in election. So this code has not been able to completely do away with such instances. Now, similarly, one important criticism of Model Code of Conduct is it interferes with governance. Now, when Model Code of Conduct is in place, it is the government in power cannot announce any major schemes or cannot take up any major projects, infrastructure projects. So what happens is this restricts the power of government in power to do any welfare measures or to take any big policy decisions. So it reduces the effectiveness of governance when the Code of Conduct is in place. And this can be detrimental to public interest. Now, another criticism, it is not widely known or understood by voters. Now, to effectively enforce Model Code of Conduct, it is necessary that all the voters know about the Code of Conduct. So when the code is violated, they can approach the relevant authorities and file a complaint. But we know that voters are not aware of Model Code of Conduct in such details, and that's why we see that instances of hate speech or fake news are still prevalent in elections. Now, one more thing is, Election Commission lacks power to disqualify candidates or deregister political parties. Now, Election Commission does not have direct power that if a Model Code of Conduct is violated, it can directly disqualify the candidates. It has to follow the legal route and take provisions of Representation of People Act or IPC or CRPC to disqualify candidate. And with regards to political parties, it does not have any power to deregister a political party. It can only disqualify candidates, that too under the respective laws and not under the Model Code of Conduct. So these are the criticism of Model Code of Conduct. Now, what are some suggestions? So, like we said, the Standing Committee on Personal and Public Grievances has recommended to make MCC legally binding. Now, the Law Commission has also given a recommendation that the government-sponsored advertisement highlighting achievement 6 months before the expiry of House and Assembly should be banned. So, we have seen in newspapers that there are various advertisements of various state governments. They highlight their schemes and achievements. So during Model Code of Conduct, they cannot do it. But Model Code of Conduct is in place only from the date of announcement till the conclusion of the announcement of results. So that is a very short period. But what government can do is, before Model Code of Conduct is announced, like for example, say 2 or 3 months before Model Code of Conduct is announced, it can start issuing the advertisement. Now that also will not create a level playing field. So, Law Commission has recommended that at least for 6 months, such kind of advertisement should be banned. And further, we can give a suggestion of using of technology or artificial intelligence. So, I have seen that the prevalence of fake news is a lot in social media, and it is not feasible to manually monitor all the activities of political parties or candidates. So in that sense, we can use artificial intelligence to track such hate speeches and fake news and bring it down or bring it to the notice of election commission to take necessary action. So these are the some of the suggestions for making model code of conduct more effective. Now let's see what was the news regarding Rythu Bandhu scheme. So we know that what Rythu Bandhu scheme mein farmers get direct benefit transfer of rupees 5,000 per acre per season for Rabi season and Kharif season. So in month of November, the Rabi installment was due. Now, since model code of conduct was in place, any such disbursement we have to take prior permission of election commission. The government rightly took the permission of election commission, but election commission has given some conditions based on which this transfer can take place. The conditions were that there should not be any publicity, no public function, and no political functionary should be involved during the disbursement process. But so what happened was a ruling party minister violated this condition when during an campaigning speech he made a mention of Rythu Bandhu scheme disbursement. So this prompted election commission to stop the disbursement of Rabi season installment. Now, the ruling party has requested election commission to reconsider its decision because it will cause irreparable loss to agricultural community. Now, since this scheme is in place since many years, the delay may cause damage to the farmers. Their input cost may increase. So that's why the government has urged election commission. Now we have to wait what the election commission replies to it. But as of now, election commission asked the government not to make any disbursement in the Rythu Bandhu scheme. Okay, so this was all the news regarding model code of conduct. Now let's see some practice questions with regards to prelims, with regards to this topic. Now the question says, consider the following statement with reference to model code of conduct. The code of conduct does not have any statutory basis. The model code of conduct comes into force immediately on announcement of election scheduled by the commission. The objective of a model code of conduct is to ensure that party in power is not able to use public money to improve its electoral prospects. Select the correct statements. So all three are correct statements which we have discussed in previous slides. So the answer will be D, all are correct. Now similarly, there has been one mains question in 2022 GS2 paper with regards to model code of conduct. Discuss the role of Election Commission of India in light of evolution of model code of conduct. So we can answer this. We can introduce this answer by mentioning what is model code of conduct in brief. Then in main body, you can write the evolution from 1960 to present times, which we have discussed in previous slides. Then you can also write how EC regulates model code of conduct and what are its powers in this regard. And since it is a 15 marks answer, we can also include some criticism and way forward. And you can conclude with way forward. So I think this notes covers all the aspects required to answer this question of 15 marks. Okay, this is all regarding the model code of conduct. Thank you.